Hi everybody, and welcome to Virtual Sunday School. Well, recently we've been talking about the book of Judges. Well, today we've got an action-packed episode with one of those judges called Gideon. Now remember, this book of Judges took place over 300 years, and this was 300 years of the Israelites saying,
"We love you, God, we're worshiping you, and wait a minute now, there's another God over here, and he's offering us free candy."
And they would go and follow that God, and then when their sugar rush ended and all of their teeth fell out, then they would think,
Uh-oh, we've worshipped the wrong God.
and God would send a hero, or maybe a better name is a judge, that would rescue them and return them to the true God. And the hero today is a man named Gideon, who lived at a time when the people of Israel were worshiping a false god, and they were being oppressed by peoples called the Midianites. And Gideon was a righteous man before God, and he thought to himself,
What happened to the old days when God would send a great leader like Moses who would free his people and miracles like splitting the sea would happen? Where is that God?
So immediately, a man dressed in a brilliant white robe appears to Gideon and says to him,
I was sent by God. I'm an angel of the Lord.
and Gideon's like,
Wait a minute now. I don't know if this is right or not.
and the angel says to him,
I want you to prepare a sacrifice, and I will show you that I'm the angel of the Lord.
So Gideon did that. He took some meat, and then he took some broth, and he put it on a rock, and immediately the angel of the Lord touched it with his staff, and poof, it went up in a big, huge ball of fire. Now, if I saw something like that, I would say, okay, angel of the Lord, I got it. But Gideon was an intelligent man, and he was skeptical. And he was the type that if somebody claimed to be something, he needed a lot more proof than just them saying that. So Gideon was like,
Is that all you got? I mean, come on, that's like a magic trick. I can take firecrackers or whatever, and I can do that. Is that all you got up your sleeve?
and so now he puts God to the test. So now this test of Gideon's was actually pretty interesting because he thought to himself,
What test am I going to give God so that I'll know? In the morning, the grass and everything is really wet with dew. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask God if I take a sheepskin
called a fleece,
and I set it on the ground, if you're God, the next morning, I want the fleece to be wet with the dew, but I want all the ground to be dry.
So lo and behold, the next morning, Gideon goes out there, and what does he find? You guessed it. The fleece is totally wet, and the ground around it is all dry. Does that convince Gideon? Nope. He says,
Well, I think that's kind of another trick, because probably what could happen is somebody could take some water and pour it on there. Just be very careful.
so he says to God,
Now, God, I don't want you to be angry with me, but I want one more test. And I want you to do exactly the opposite. What I want to see, God, please, is that the fleece is dry, but the floor around it is all wet.
and sure enough, the next morning, you guessed it again, the fleece was totally dry, and the floor around it was all wet. And at that point, Gideon said,
You are the Lord our God.
and he believed that that was the angel of God that he saw, and that was God. So Gideon, now believing that this was the true God, raised up an army knowing that God would be with him. And he raised over 22,000 men to fight against these Midianites. And he said to God,
God, I'm ready to go.
and God said,
You know what? This is really boring if I just send you in with a bunch of guys. We're going to cut them in half. We're going to make it 10,000.
so Gideon's thinking,
10,000 people, God, I don't know if that's necessarily the best idea.
so God said,
Fine, we'll make it 300 people. You can go to battle against 100,000 army of the Midianites with 300 people. Wait, there's even more. I'm going to give you a secret weapon.
Gideon thinks,
All right, this is going to be great.
and what does he give him? You've heard this story before. He gives them trumpets. And so Gideon, together with the power of God, was able to overcome this huge force. And the people of Israel, seeing this, returned back to worship the one true God. But now this kind of brings up a question. In the beginning, Gideon was questioning God. So is that okay? Are we allowed to question God? Are we allowed to doubt? Well, the answer to that from the Orthodox is absolutely. Because one of the big examples that we have is we have our own Virgin Mary, the Theotokos. Because when the angel came to her, the first thing she did was to question it. She wanted to be sure. And that's what Gideon did. So it's okay if somebody comes to us and they say something that we're allowed to think about that and say, let me test this and let me make sure that this is actually the truth. Even Jesus himself told us that we must beware that many people will come falsely in my name. So the lesson for us to take away from this is don't judge by appearances. You are allowed to test. Let me give you an example. If somebody comes to you and they're all dressed nasty and their beard's all scraggly, and they come and they go, here's some candy for you, you'd probably think to yourself, I'm not taking any of this candy. But what if somebody who was very handsome or very beautiful looking came to you and in a nice voice said, here, I'd like to offer you this candy. You should have the same reaction, because we always have to test, because we don't know. We don't judge by appearances. And that's the moral of the story of Gideon, because even though the angel appeared in a bright light, Gideon still wanted to test and make sure that this was truly sent by God. So anyway, thanks all for joining us. And remember, like, share, subscribe, and we'll be seeing you next time.